Yeah, sure. So let's first understand what altitude is, and then we can understand what the thinking is and why we do things slightly differently in this regard. So once you go up to high altitude, what happens is there's less pressure in the atmosphere, and because there's less pressure in the atmosphere, that thing which is pressure that pushes all the gases together starts to loosen up. So it isn't that there's less oxygen at high altitude. It's just that the pressure that holds it all together is less. So when I consume a full breath of air, my lungs feel full, feel satiated in the same way that they do down here at sea level. But I'm consuming less particles with every breath of air. So I'm consuming less oxygen. And so my body reacts to that by producing red blood cells. And the production of red blood cells and then the equilibrium that it brings is what we call acclimatization. So acclimatization it is getting used to altitude, but there's a physiological mechanism at play that makes us used to altitude. It's not a psychological use, like getting used to altitude hypothetically. There's something that's actually physiologically happening in our bodies. So the production of red blood cells, the process of that production is what we call acclimatization. And the way that our body produces red blood cells is it consumes calories, right? So it uses up energy. So as we're going up, it uses up energy in order for it to produce more red blood cells. And as the red blood cells are being produced, then our bloodstreams are becoming saturated with red blood cells. So what does this mean for us? It means two things. One, that we're consuming more calories at altitude at rest than we are down at sea level, which means that we need to consume enough calories, not just to have the energy to do the day on Kilimanjaro, but also we need to be consuming enough calories to compensate for the production of red blood cells that our body is undergoing in order to survive in this altitude. So eating is extremely important. Now, because our bloodstream is basically becoming more saturated with red blood cells, more so than it's used to, we need to dilute those red blood cells. So we need to consume more water, which we also need to consume because we're at high altitude and we're walking. And so we're generally in, like we described earlier, the environments are so varied. We could be in really hot temperatures, and our bodies are exerting themselves, and so we're losing our liquid through sweat, and we need to compensate for that drinking in addition to diluting our red blood cells. So eating is super important. Drinking water and staying hydrated is super important for altitude. And then of course, the faster we move, the higher our heart rate, the more our body feels like it's burning more calories, and so we're become more fatigued. So walking at a slow and steady pace is extremely important. And that's why pole pole is something you hear a lot on Kilimanjaro. Literally means slowly, slowly. And that's because we need to keep our heart rate down in order for us not to be overexerting ourselves. And that's something you get on the first days. Like people are super strong, they're ready to go, they're ready to kill it. And they reach the first camp in no time. And then when we come to summit night, it's like, where's all that energy? It's because we've already consumed it on earlier days. So slowly, slowly conserving energy, super important. And then of course, resting. Nothing beats rest. The more we can rest and the more we can sleep, the more our body is able to recover, the better we're going to feel on the subsequent days. Medication at high altitude, particularly Diamox, doesn't produce calories, does not hydrate, actually dehydrates, which is a very important point to keep in mind. And of course, it doesn't help us with sleep or rest. It does have its uses, don't get me wrong. And when symptoms start to show, if sometimes you feel like some certain symptoms like bad headaches or so on and so forth, it may be one of the tools in our arsenal to combat it. But it should not be used for preventative purposes, specifically because on the list of reasons why people turn around on Kilimanjaro, the number one reason is dehydration. People are dehydrated. They're losing their nutrients through sweat. They're losing their nutrients through exertion. And now we're introducing a diuretic, which is another way for us to lose our nutrients. And that's why we turn around. And the symptoms, dealing with acute symptoms of high altitude, is like problem number 4 or 5, maybe even lower down on that list. right? And that's where the Diamox becomes an effective tool. But it's a balance of issues, like with all things in when we're introducing medicines, it's a balance of issues. If you have one problem and you deal with it with a medicine that will exacerbate another bigger problem that you already have, then you're probably going to want to stay away from that. And that's the issue with Diamox and with apoacetazolamide. You're in this situation where it's like, yes, altitude is an issue, but on Kilimanjaro specifically, altitude is not the number one issue, and it's not even in the top 5 issues that we may have to deal with. If you have a little bit of a headache, sometimes it's normal. A Panadol, a painkiller, would usually go way further than treating it with a diuretic. Diamox has its place, but it shouldn't be used regularly. So that's my little explanation about high altitude. I'll go one step further and just also say that, at the end of the day, we want to go up and we want to experience the mountain. We want to feel what it's like to be on Kilimanjaro, and we also don't want to hurt ourselves in the process. So we have an ethos at Life Happens Outdoors, which is that if you aren't capable today, the mountain is not going anywhere. If it's just bad luck, if your physiology just doesn't want to work, if it's just not the time to go up to the top, it's just not the time to go up to the top. What we don't want to do is push you, have you be a dehydrated raisin on the summit, on the brink of severe problems, probably having severe internal problems without realizing, and then send you back down having summited, but with permanent problems for the rest of your life. That's not what we're about. What we want is for you to get up there on your own 2 feet, be proud of your achievement, and come down and come back for more, and not think that this was like hell on earth and you don't know how you did this. That's not the point. We don't want that. And it's very often that we unfortunately see many other climbers and many other groups kind of, now the latest thing is seeing these oxygen, tubes and somebody walking behind with an oxygen tank. It's like, guys, we're not even at 6,000 meters. Oxygen is not necessary up here except as an emergency tool to go down. Because what happens if that oxygen runs out and you're using it to go up? Or what happens if the system fails? I mean, we're not in a, it's not that the environment is one in which these things are more likely than not, unfortunately. So then what? You've now gotten your body used to lower altitude because you're artificially pumping it with oxygen, and suddenly you shock it at a much higher altitude than you should be, instead of just going down, letting your body recover at lower altitude, and then maybe giving it a second shot, or maybe, allowing your body to live and be healthy to come back another day. So yeah, there you have it.